You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And on this episode, we are bringing you an author chat with Vincent Yu, who joins us to talk about his debut novel, Seek Immediate Shelter, following the stories of residents of a small town in Massachusetts who receive a distressing message that a ballistic missile is inbound. The alert is later deemed to be a false alarm, leaving the residents to deal with the consequences of the actions they took during the period of time when they all thought they were about to die. As always, Books and Boba is supported in part by our listeners, so if you've been enjoying our podcast and want to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba, where as an official Patreon supporter, you gain access to our members-only Discord server, where you can chat with us and fellow book club members in real time about all sorts of topics, including our monthly book club picks. And if you join us at the Honey Boba level, you also gain access to our monthly bonus podcast, Boba Chats, as well as the opportunity to help us choose a quarterly Patron's Choice Book Club pick. The next selection process will be starting in a few weeks, so join now if you want to participate in the selection of our July Book Club pick.
Yeah, so we talked to Vincent about his background in short story writing and how he transitioned into full-length novels, how he got into the mindset of these characters who all live in the same town and interact with each other. We talk about guilt and forgiveness and just pretty much how life crises make for bad decisions, I guess, like life-changing decisions. I hope that made sense. But yeah, like I hope you guys enjoy our conversation with Vincent Yu. And we are here with Vincent Yu, who is a sales manager at W.W. Norton and Live Right, and is the winner of the 2021 Ashley Bourne Prize for Fiction from Plowshares. And we're here to talk about his debut novel, Seek Immediate Shelter. Welcome to the show, Vincent.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be on.
Yeah. So we usually start our chats with some kind of icebreaker, and I thought it would be fun to ask you if you could experience a movie for the first time ever again, as in you can wipe your memory of it now and experience it for the first time ever, what would it be?
That's such a great question. And it'll have to be a movie that I actually saw recently. I watched this movie called Rosemead. It stars Lucy Liu, and it is based on a true story of a Chinese immigrant mother who settles in the town of Rosemead, near LA in Southern California, and she has to deal with her own illness as well as her son's growing schizophrenia. It is this incredibly moving, empathetic, absolutely gorgeous look at Asian parenting, and it really, really devastated me. It was so moving and it was so beautiful, and it accomplished, I think, what I think all good art should be, which is that it really encouraged the viewer to empathize with the unfathomable. And I'll just leave it at that. I recommend every person in the world watch it. I think it's so wonderful. And, I'm sure that if I watched it 10 more times, it would still be incredibly moving for me. But that first time I felt like really, really changed.
Yeah, I've heard great things about Rosemead, and just by the premise, I'm like, this is a movie I can only experience once because it's just so heartbreaking and like so emotional, and it's like I can't do it. Only one time. So that's a great choice that you picked.
Thanks. Yeah. Bring your tissues, and water to rehydrate from all the tears. Also, I'll be honest.
So we like to start off with like your writing journey. So if I'm correct, I know that like your background is in like science, and that's very different from creative writing. So was writing something that you were always interested in when you were younger, or was it something that you got into later in life?
It was definitely the latter. Yeah, as you mentioned, I went to school and I studied biology all 4 years, and I graduated with a degree in evolutionary biology. And I sort of fell into writing by coincidence. I didn't really. I just one day, I think it was like second semester of my senior year of college. I was like, oh, I feel kind of, for lack of a better term, I felt kind of empty. I missed having a sort of a creative outlet, and I just started writing. And just there is always, I think, with writers, the fear and the terror of the blank page, but it's also rooted in a kind of thrill. And once I experienced that thrill, it almost became like an addiction. I really could not stop. Which is not to say I was good at it at all at first, but I found that actually, as I continued to write, my background in evolutionary biology was actually in a lot of ways kind of helpful. It allowed me to sort of experiment with different characters, sort of experiment with what I wanted to say, what I wanted to write about. And it also just a lot of biological concepts kind of lent themselves very well to literature, to sort of metaphorical exploration. So that is that's a long-winded answer of basically saying I stumbled into writing.
Yeah, what kind of stories did you write when you first started? Like, was it just like short stories? Was it like what genre were you like drawn to? Or
Yeah, they were almost exclusively short stories, and they continue to be short stories. Everything that I write, even now, begins as a short story, and only when the idea kind of starts to break the bounds of the form do I consider turning it into a novel. Even though I majored in biology and I studied biology, I have always really really loved reading, and so I was definitely influenced by a lot of literary fiction that I read growing up, and those kinds of stories were the ones that I began writing. They were very they were very kind of tepid and kind of like shoegazing. It was just a guy walking around a park, like thinking about life, stuff like that. It was it was in a lot of ways. It was also kind of self therapy for me. I felt like I didn't know myself particularly well, and writing fictionalized versions of myself helped me discover more of who I was and what I wanted to do with my life.
yeah. So how long was it before you like had enough of like a body of work that you thought maybe let's try to get published? Or was that always like was getting published always kind of the end goal, or one of the one of the possibilities when you started writing? Like what took you to like writing for therapy to like, hey, maybe I can get this out into the world?
Hmm. Uh, it took a couple of years. It also took I had to sort of understand what was a sort of a reasonable goal. So, and I when having started writing short stories, I really wanted to have them published in short story magazines. And within a couple of years, I would say 3 or 4, I started having enough confidence to sort of submit them to magazines. And like many writers, I received that kind of like flood, that tsunami of rejection that that I continue to receive. Um, the first time I wrote a story that I felt was big enough to turn into a book, and then from there on, kind of started to research the process of getting an actual book published. That took that took about 7-8 years. Uh, yeah, about 7 or 8 years, to be honest. And it was definitely a sort of a pie in the sky. It was just a dream at first. When I started writing longer pieces, and I had a couple publications in magazines under my belt, and to this day, it's still my book only came out in the beginning of May, so it's still very very surreal, and it still does feel like a dream. So
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, since Seek Immediate Shelter reads kind of like a series of short stories, because each chapter is from a different character's point of view. And I guess like the glue of the book is like the setting and also the ballistic alarm, that sends out the false alarm throughout this small town. And I wanted to ask you, like, did this novel originally start off as a short story? And you seem to have answered that question already. What was the first story? What was the first chapter that you had written?
That's such a great question. The first chapter was chapter 7, the story of Russ. That is not by coincidence the longest story. It's because it was the first one, and it was kind of, I felt like it was bursting at the seams already, and I still didn't feel satisfied when I was done with it. And yeah, I mean, this is where kind of the biology aspect, I guess, of my education comes back in my writing. After I'd finished Russ's story, I realized, what I really wanted to write about. There was this missile alert, but what I really wanted to write about was characters. I wanted to write about human beings who were put into really, really high pressure situations, and I wanted to see how they came out of them. And so a lot of ways I considered this kind of a literary experiment. And so after I'd written the Russ story, I basically just came up with another character and another character. Ultimately, there are 9 chapters, 9 characters, and each of them I thought of as kind of like a petri dish, with the you have the agar, this kind of nutrient gel, and you kind of inoculate something onto the dish, and then you put it into a, I don't know, I forget the word now, but I don't know, you just let it chill or whatever, and then it will, it develops into something distinct. And in that way, each of these 9 characters, I like to think I put them in kind of a pressure chamber, and I watched them develop. And so that was very much my writing process. This was, when I say that, everything starts as a short story. This very literally, started as one, and then sort of just multiplied and duplicated itself.
Yeah, I mean, so you have all of these, vignettes of people like reacting to this alert and the aftermath. But all the stories also have characters and side characters that intersect with each other. And I'm just curious, just how did you keep everyone like? Did you just create the characters as they went along, and then decided where the connections were, or did you have was everything mapped out like at some point where it's like, this person is this person's brother, this person's ex, this person's teacher?
Yeah, no, thank you. It was like 25-75. 25% mapped out, 75% kind of, I don't want to say I kind of improvised, but I think that my writing practice has always been, I've always felt really drawn to the E.L. Doctorow metaphor, where he says that his writing process is like driving at night with the headlights of your car on. And so you can only see what's 10 feet ahead of you, but you kind of just trust the process, or you trust your own driving, and you trust it to get you to your destination. And that's very much how I feel about my writing. It just started with a missile alert and then a character. And it was sort of, what if the character acted this way in relation to the missile alert? As I wrote more characters, I came up with ideas for how to link them to other characters. But the majority of the linkage, if you will, happened after all the stories were written. And I realized that even though each story has its own distinct characters and its own distinct plot, I did want this to feel more like a novel than a short story collection. I did also, the fact that it's a novel, I wanted it to explore community. I wanted it to explore the fact that not only are these people all linked by a ballistic missile alert, but they're all linked by living in the same town or happening to be in the same town that receives this alert. And from there, there was a lot of after the fact sort of post linkage. I think it's fun to read, and it was fun for me to write like different Easter eggs too. Sometimes I made characters just appear, and they didn't even have much of a narrative basis for appearing. I just I wanted to sort of capture sort of the randomness and the coincidence of life as well.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get a sense of like this all takes place in this community, and it's like everyone may not know of each other, but everyone runs into each other. Because a lot of times, a couple times in your book, actually, I had to stop and because you don't always name your cameos, but based on their descriptions, you okay, I think this is that other person, and some of them were also side characters in another story. So you had background characters having their own narratives running behind all your stories as well. I thought that was really fun to watch for me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, they're definitely It's something else I wanted to capture, the stories within stories. This idea that I think it's kind of a fallacy to think that we can ever capture everything about like one set of events, that we can assign causality to one set of events. I think there's just always all these moving and shifting undercurrents that also influence things.
So where did the idea of like setting a story around like basically, in your book, the whole town gets a missile alert and everyone just crashes out, everyone freaks out and kind of essentially acts on instinct. And because immediately after the missile launch is deemed a false alarm, they have to like deal with the aftermath.
Not
of that.
immediately,
Right.
Marvin.
Well, 18 minutes, like that's almost immediately. That's essentially like that's long enough for you to do something dumb, but not long enough for you to like. I mean, that's long enough for like you to act on impulse, right? And so, where did this idea come from? Like of like this specific like situation being like the basis of your stories?
Yeah. So this story actually, it came from just this idea, a question that I had bouncing around in my head, a very basic question that was just, how would I react if I thought I was going to die at any moment? It was one of those questions that kind of hit me as I was like right about to fall asleep one night, and then couldn't fall asleep after that. And it kind of just kept bouncing around in my head. And whenever something like that happens, my instinct is to write it, or write something about it. I mentioned that a lot of times writing is therapy. It really is. And it's also a means of self-discovery. And so I decided I wanted to write a story to explore that idea, explore that question, maybe even answer it for myself. This was around the year 2022, and which means that it had been 4 years since an actual false missile alert had been sent to Hawaii. That was in 2018. And I remember, learning about that event when it happened and thinking like, wow, that's really messed up. That must really suck. But it didn't really, for some reason, it didn't imprint on me until this kind of question started bouncing around in my head. And then I realized that I had almost the ultimate, or not the ultimate, but I had a really, really great setup for a story that could explore these questions. It was also just a really, really juicy premise too. I thought there was just so much opportunity for drama, for familial dynamics, for complicated stuff, secrets to come out, stuff like that. And so it really it felt like it lent itself to a story. And after I wrote the first one, I felt like it lent itself to many stories. And so that's really the genesis of the idea.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were inspired at all by the 2018 ballistic missile false alarm in Hawaii, because it reminded me so much of like how people reacted. Some people were like caught in a really difficult place where they weren't with their loved ones, or their loved ones were in scattered areas, and they're like, where do I go? Who do I pick? Who do I seek shelter with? And in your book, I thought it was funny how there were characters who panicked and, took the alert very seriously, while there were others who were like, there's no way this is real. And I just wanted to ask you, like, what do you think is the fundamental difference between those two types of characters? The one who like took it really seriously and are like, this is a life or death situation. Like, I have to brace myself for impact. And then like the characters who are like, we'll probably be okay.
That's such a great question. It's in a lot of ways, my character work, the layering of the characters began with that fundamental question: is if the character took the alert seriously or not. And in that way, the characters who, they're fewer, but the characters who did not take it seriously, who are more kind of, like this could not be happening, disbelieving, that is reflected in the rest of the story that is told about them. Those kinds of characters I wanted to be more kind of more straightforward, more sort of business-like. They're more accomplished, they're richer. They're often older, they have more established careers, and they've been through more things. And in a lot of ways also, there's one particular character who brushes the alert aside, and she's she's also naturally distrustful, and so she thinks that the alert not only is a false alert, she thinks it's a scam, and that distrustfulness and her, her need eventually to that distrustfulness becomes really the crux of her story and how she grows from the alert.
I did think it was really funny how I corrected Marvin earlier that it wasn't an immediate correction saying like, oh, false alarm. It was like 18 minutes had passed since the alarm was sent, and it's just enough time for characters to make really bad decisions, whether it's by instinct, by fear, by love. Like there's repercussions that they have to face from the actions that they made in those 18 minutes. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how guilt and forgiveness shape your characters' second acts in your stories.
Sure. And, first of all, thank you so much for noticing that. Yeah, the 18 minutes that was everything I write is a conscious choice, but that was, insofar as I based this off a real event. In Hawaii, it was 38 minutes. And so I cut it down to 18 specifically because I wanted, like, as you said, Rira, I wanted there to be kind of enough time to billow for people to be like to start to legitimately panic and start to wonder. But at the same time, I didn't want so much time to pass that people would, that the moment would lose its drama and that people would start to sort of wonder what exactly was happening. The heartbeat would kind of slow down and things would go back to normal. So the 18 minutes was definitely very purposeful. And in terms of guilt, I mean, that was definitely just one of the core themes I wanted to explore in the book, because a lot of these characters, when they hear the alert, they act in selfish, really off-putting ways. And that, this was a purposeful choice that I made for them. I wanted these characters to be kind of difficult. I wanted them to be naughty with a K, kind of complex, because I wanted there to be redemption at the end. That's, I think, one of my core goals as writing this book and then writing in general is finding a root of empathy through a person, no matter the way a person may seem, or no matter the way he or she reacts. And so, to me, guilt is inevitable, but it goes hand in hand with forgiveness. There's no, I don't think there's any worth to a story that only explores guilt without some kind of, redemption or grace.
And I also think that forgiveness is very different from forgetting. And like the first chapter in your book, I just laughed throughout the entire chapter because it's about this husband who, he was sleeping when the alert went off, and his wife is the one saying like, hey, wake up, a missile is coming, we need to find shelter. And he's like, oh, shoot. And he gets himself in the car and pretty much leaves his wife and baby behind, and like also scrapes his car on the way out. And I was like, how do you come back from this? Like, because for me, if I was in the wife's shoe, I would be like, there's no redemption. Like I would say divorce right away, because clearly you were not thinking about your family during this like life or death situation. And like I was just thinking like, how do people just move on from something that decisions you can't take back? And all of your characters have this turning point where they can't take a decision back, and it pretty much shapes the entire trajectory of like their second act. Do you believe in those turning points in real life, like waypoints?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I do. I think that there are going to be a handful of moments in anyone's life that just kind of split it from, before and after. And yeah, I mean, thanks for mentioning that first story. That first story, I mean, I placed it at the very beginning because I do think it also gets at that core theme that I wanted to explore, is that how do you come back from something like that? And it's funny, a lot of people, and when I was writing this character, his name is David. Yeah, he speeds away. His I wanted. He's guilty. He made a conscious bad decision that was cowardly and selfish. But I've gotten a lot of responses too from people saying like he's got to take it easy on himself. Like the fact that he feels so guilty afterward, and the fact that he spends so much time trying to interrogate that moment and sort of try to understand how he was really feeling. Um, People also seem to want to give him a break, and so I just thought that was I thought that was such a gift to me as a writer, to be able to engender these kinds of different responses, and for as you mentioned, Vera, for people to kind of then put themselves into the shoes of different characters I've created, that sort of exercise in empathy. And yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, yeah, we do things or things happen to us rather, and they separate our lives and they change things inevitably, and that's part of the beauty, part of the tragedy, I think, of being a human, of existing sort of in time, of having to die eventually, having a finite lifespan, is that there are things and there are just events that lend more meaning to our narratives than others. And if we screw up, as I believe David, the character in the first story, does, yeah, what's left for him? Well, that's, I wanted it to be a funny story too. And he works in public relations, and he's all about the narrative and changing the narrative. And he's this self-declared pro when it comes to crisis communications. And so, he has to assign him, he almost has to make himself a client, his own client. He has to think, how can I change the narrative? What can I do to sort of, to move the news cycle along? And, and then he, in a similar way, he reduces his wife to a consumer of news or whatnot. And it's a funny, but also I think kind of tragic way in which, we can look at the state of modern affairs, and we can look at the state of just how we view the news.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that first story too. Like, I think, like you mentioned, it does a really great job, like setting the tone of like, this is the type of stories that we're telling. I was not prepared for the next few chapters where I also get hit with the Chinese American story of it all, with the second story with the mom, the, let's say, narcissistic kind of boomer-ish mom who like just can't help but say mean things to her daughter even though she doesn't mean to. The myriad, like you have a lot of Chinese American characters in your story because this community is also home to like a Chinese American community. A lot of them live in this town. You do a really great job showcasing like the myriad stories. Like, Asian America is not a monolith, Chinese America is not a monolith. You have different people, different perspectives because of when they came, who they came, if they're first generation, second generation, or third generation immigrants. And like, I think the universal themes really work. But for me and for us as an Asian American, we read Asian American books on this podcast. I thought it was really worked as an Asian American story as well. Was that dimension always part of like the overall like novel you're creating, or did it come because of the characters?
I mean, I'm an Asian American and I write, and so I am an Asian American writer. And I am most at home and I feel most authentic in my writing when I'm writing about Asian American characters. Those are just inalienable, non-immiscible things that my identity informs my writing, and to an extent vice versa as well. And with that in mind, one of my main projects with this book was to write, as you said, from a vast, because I got to work with so many characters from a wider perspective of Asian American voices. So there were some characters that I specifically wrote to have Asian American names and to be Asian American, but to almost happen to be that way, insofar as they, we can go back to this first character again, David. His name is David Lee, and his father is David Lee Sr., and they live in this community. But again, it's a story about his personal cowardice. It's a story about his attempts at shifting narratives. There's the Asian American aspect is very much just another layer of who he is. And as you mentioned, yeah, there's stories that do more specifically explore Asian Americanness. And what I wanted to do with those, and um, what I really what I love about Asian American literature, I'll start there. What I love about it, and that's obviously a huge can of worms, but what I love about it is that it's new. It is very, very young. We as a country, the United States is a young country to begin with. And we are a young country full of early sins. And among those sins are racism, the Chinese Exclusion Act, etc. So we have Chinese, and I don't mean to only limit it to Chinese. Asian immigrants in this country are a new breed, a fantastically new breed. Even though the Chinese Exclusion Act, I think, was repealed in like the 40s, it didn't. Chinese American or Asians did not start really immigrating into this country until the 60s. And by virtue of that, our literary tradition is very, very young as well. And so you get a lot of stories that focus on this immigrant experience and the trauma inherent in that immigrant experience. And it's definitely a deeply, it's a personal, sort of fruitful, engaging topic. But what I've been thinking about is what happens a couple generations from now. Knock on wood that we remain, a functioning country and everything. But what happens when we get to third generation immigrants, fourth generation Asian American immigrants, when these people still have Asian names, Asian features, and are part of Asian culture, but they're chronologically, they have been separated from the act of immigration for many years, to the point where they don't remember it. They have no living relatives who immigrated. And those kinds of nuances were definitely also what I tried to explore in this book. In the second chapter you mentioned, where you have this mother who's kind of a narcissist. She is second gen and her husband is third gen. And by virtue of that fact, they love each other, and they understand a lot about each other, but they both realize that there's a really big gulf in their experiences as Asian Americans, and as a result, in their expectations for their own children and their expectations for themselves.
I love the fact that you included, you had like a couple that were in different generations of immigration, and you showed like how that clashes and how their parenting styles differ, because Nina, the quote unquote narcissistic mother, she grew up with like Asian expectations, like, go for academic excellence because we are a minority in this country and no one is going to take us seriously. So becoming a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, you can't mock those people because they're already at the top of the professional food chain. And whereas with her husband, it's like, I just want my children to be happy. They don't have to be any of those professions because they have nothing to prove. They are Americans. Like, they are free to do whatever they like. And I feel like that is a thing that comes up a lot when it comes to parenting as like an Asian American parent, because it's like, okay, like in Asian culture, the adults, the parents, they're hold to like a higher esteem, always obey your elders, they know best. And in an American and Western parenting culture, it's more like your parents, like your parents clothe and feed you because that's their job. Like, you don't owe them for giving you basic necessities. They chose to be parents. So you as children don't owe anything to your parents. And I'm just curious, like, what's your personal opinion as like an Asian American writer, what children and parents owe to each other?
Oh yeah, that's such a great question. And so just for background, I am second generation. My parents immigrated in the 80s. I was born in the United States. They both immigrated from mainland China. And it's funny. I've been really thinking about this. I've been thinking about it not just when I was writing this, Seek Immediate Shelter, but actually currently with my work in progress, because it is, with Nina's character, a part of the reason also I wanted to give more sort of psychological insight. A part of the reason why she has such high expectations, why she is so demanding, and as you mentioned, Rira, like needs that kind of unqualified success and respect, is because her parents owned a sign shop. They owned a printing shop. And I was directly influenced by, a couple years ago in the older internet, there's this website called English, where they were like early memes, and they were like images of really unfortunate typos in like Chinese restaurant menus, or just bad versions of Google Translate. And it was haha funny, but there's there's something mean spirited about that. There's just a ridicule that is imparted on the party that is doing its best to exist in a world where the language is just so utterly and completely different, and is so utterly just like littered with idiosyncrasies. I'm speaking of English. And so in that way, with Nina, she has experienced the trauma of ridicule, and and she's experienced it with parents, with her own parents, people whom she loves more than anything. And so her reasoning for Kate, her daughter, wanting her to be reach a more a higher level of success, it's very, as you mentioned, it's very straightforward. She says nobody can mock you when you're elbow deep in their guts, right? Like, you're not going to mock your surgeon for having an accent if the surgeon's like got the like Indiana Jones has the heart in your hand and can do anything, right? And to that extent, I think that when it comes to that kind of parenting philosophy, that first generation, I think the thing that really sticks out to me is that hypocrisy is not something they register. I've noticed that a lot of in third, fourth generations, and then a lot of people who have just non-Asian Americans, there's this issue of the parent leading by example, and the child having this argument of hypocrisy as sort of a final argument. It's like, don't do this, and the child says, well, you do it, and you're not setting a good example. And that's I think that's very much a kind of, it's a Western idea, whereas in at least with immigrant cultures and Eastern cultures, the idea of hypocrisy is, of course I get to be hypocritical as a parent towards my child. Of course I can hold you to a higher expectation than I hold myself. I can demand better of you than I demand of myself, because that's the entire nature of the immigrant experience. The entire nature is improvement, is upward mobility. To get back to your original question of which I believe in, I'm not a parent. I don't know if I will ever be a parent. My own parents, I think, were a mix. They definitely didn't understand when I told them I wanted to be a novelist. They're like, what does that even, like, what does that mean? Like, do you need 100 books? We can print out your book and like staple it together and sell it at like Costco or something if you want. So they didn't actually say that, but it was it's something that I'm still trying to explore and still trying to reconcile.
Yeah, I mean, as a new parent myself, I think part of it is, your character Nina's struggle is she understands she's perpetuating the cycle of like emotional abuse that she got from her parents, but she can't really help herself. And I think everyone's trying their best. You can tell through your writing, you express that Nina's trying her best too. She just can't help herself for various reasons. And I think, we sympathize with her, but we also we can't really forget the things that she actually did, right? Like the thing that she did when she thought they were about to die from the missile strike was really bad. I can't wait for the readers to like check it out. Like if you haven't read the book yet, like you will also like gasp, like, oh man, if my mom did this to me, I don't know how I would react,
Okay, but like when I feel like I am in the minority here in terms of like Nina's text message to her daughter Kate being like, oh, like you moved away, like good thing you moved away, like it was really selfish of you. I don't know if it's because like I have a sort of similar relationship with my mother, but like for me it was just like whatever, that's just like a throwaway message. Yeah, it hurts, but it's just kind of like in my head I'm like they can't help themselves. This is like a disease that they have, and it's not reflective of their love for you. So I'm very different from Kate the daughter, but I'm just like, I don't know, if my mom sent me that text I'll be like, well, that's just mom. Like, at least I know that's like that's actually my mom and not like an imposter. I feel like, we want to be different when we pass, right? We want to be looked in a good light, but then it's just a lie at that point. Like we leave with um when we leave the people that we love behind, like it's not just going to be good things, it's also going to be things that we scarred them with. And I think it's really disingenuous to just I don't know, like kind of tie things up in a pretty bow when you think you're gonna die. So I don't know. I'm in like the minority when it comes to.
I mean, to be fair though, we are fully grown adults with fully formed frontal lobes. I think Kate's still like in her early 20s at this point. You're
I
still
don't
kind
know.
of a
I
kid
feel like
at
in
that
my
point.
20s. I did want to ask, like one of the reasons why like characters like Nina believe that this missile alert is kind of a hoax or a scam is because they live in a suburban town in Massachusetts, and they're like, why would anybody bomb here? Why did you choose this small town setting, and what advantages did it give you as a writer?
First of all, just now that repartee between Marvin, Rira, and Marvin was like a writer's dream, right? I love that. I absolutely love that. The fact that you're bringing your own experiences to bear upon a character that I came up with. It's truly the dream. So thank you. When it comes to the setting of this book, I grew up in a small semi-rural town in Western Massachusetts. And so the town of Beckett that receives the alert is directly influenced by my hometown. It's called Longmeadow, Massachusetts, a little town founded 1644, has a population of roughly 10,000 people. And so, this was based on an alert that happened in Hawaii. And if I had my druthers, I would have loved to like taken a couple months, gone to, lived in Hawaii, really done my research, explored the islands. But more realistically, and I think more truthfully to my sort of artistic ethos, I wanted to write about a place I knew first and foremost. And I know towns like Beckett. I know I grew up in them. And I felt as if I knew the cadences, the changes of the season, the sort of unique, certain unique manners of speaking and unique manners of thinking. And being as this was my debut, I really wanted to sort of stick with the most, truthful thing I could say. Some of the other reasons, though, that some of the other conveniences that made Beckett so apt for this story were, like you mentioned, Mira, the fact that it's just like this random town in Massachusetts. And so that lent a lot of the characters a lot of realism to their disbelief. But what I really like about towns like Beckett and towns like the one I grew up in is the fact that they have this kind of carapace of sameness. They have there's this idea that, yeah, they're unchanging. The population always stays the same. They've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and there's just that steadiness of them. And while on the outside, it may seem like that, what I wanted to explore, when I was thinking about lives within lives, stories within stories, was the fact that there's a lot of real drama, a lot of real change that happens even in these kinds of small, quiet communities. And I think the way in which that sort of most clearly manifested itself in the book was this central row of shops. They're called the Beckett shops. They're based directly on a central row of shops in my hometown called the Longmeadow shops. And the shops, the entity of the shops themselves has always been there. It's I still remember there used to be a Friendly's, which is like a kind of a semi-local ice cream chain. And, growing up in middle school, high school, that was where everyone went for like their first date. So it was just this like crucible of teenage awkwardness. But it was like part of it was part of that experience. And eventually it went out of business and it became a sushi restaurant. And then that went out of business and it became I don't know, Tex-Mex or something. But the idea was that even though the shops exist and they persist, the storefronts are changing. The composition and the identity of this row of shops is very fluid. And I wanted to explore that almost in a philosophical way, kind of like that, like the ship of Theseus. Like if you're replacing all these parts with new ones, is it still the same thing? And if not, how have things changed? And so Beckett, being a small town, really, really allowed me to explore that. It allowed also for a lot of cohesion between the stories. There's this very kind of on the nose restaurant called the Anchor that everyone that makes an appearance, I think, in every story, and it's it's called the Anchor for a reason. I really did want a very strong sense of place in the novel, and I wanted to have that sense of interconnectedness, and that was something I think again that just a small town really, really was able to capture.
Yeah, I feel like Beckett is one of those towns where when you're young, you're like, I can't wait to leave. I can't wait to go to the big city. And then when you get older, you're like, actually, I would like to go back because there's like a steadiness, there's like a content feeling of small towns like that. And one of the stores that you mentioned, like that's on the main street, it's actually Nina's music shop that she runs with her husband, Major Third. And I couldn't help but notice that like music is like a recurring element in your book. You have a character who is like a violinist and goes to be in a bluegrass band with a lot of other personal baggage. I won't spoil it, but why was music an integral part of your writing?
Yeah, just because of personally, I grew up as a musician. I was classically trained in piano and violin, and I got as far as being a member of my college orchestra, playing violin for I think like 2 years, and I kind of dropped off. And for a long time, I really missed it. And at the same time, I didn't have any real desire to pick either of those instruments back up, even though I did feel as if I were missing this real outlet of expression. And so when once I started writing really seriously, and once I started kind of exploring with different forms of writing and different topics, sort of the idea that I could write about music was a really, really, it was like an aha moment for me. And it became, it was like, and it sort of like filled that hole. It just gave me like a renewed sort of way to express myself. And I just, and I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I did have, some expertise, some experience in it. And I've it's been a blast really writing about music, writing about the act of playing music, the trying to put into words a fundamentally sort of auditory experience. Has just been it's a joy. It's kind of, like a puzzle for the writer to figure out. And so I wanted that to be a big part of the story. And I should add also, but I don't know too much about bluegrass. I did some research for the book, but what I wanted to explore was that character Nick. He suffers from something I really suffered with, just anxiety, stage fright. And you can have that, but as a violinist, when you get the shakes or when you get stage fright, it actually like really manifests itself clearly in your playing. You have to hold the bow of the violin with like incredible like sort of steadiness and delicacy, and just a little bit of a shake can really throw you off. And that was something I experienced, and I'd never read about it in any other book, so I decided to put that in.
I think it's also a quintessentially Asian American experience to learn an instrument, a classical instrument, from a young age, whether you stick with it or not. We are approaching the end of our time here, and I do want to ask you, like, how did you know that your book was finished? Because you could have gone on and on adding new characters to like this town, and I just figured like it must have been so hard to kind of stop the what if switch in your brain. So how did you know you were done?
That's such a great question, and the answer is very frankly, I did not. My agent had to tell me, and then my editor had to tell me after that. There's no, I could. I so love this idea, and I think it is such a durable and fruitful idea that I could have written 10 more stories about this community, about these characters. Actually, when it came time to really edit my book, I cut I cut only one story, but it was even doing that was difficult for sure. I think it was the right decision, but it was difficult. And yeah, for that to have had that sort of guidance and that sort of that objective but still caring third party to be like, you have to quote unquote kill your darling. I feel very grateful and very privileged for that, because yeah, sometimes you're just like, I was, for a lot of it, I was too close to these characters, too close to the narrative.
Okay, I gotta ask, since you mentioned it, what can you give us a little, like, I guess, taste of the story that you did cut? Because I just want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the more I think about it, the more time that has passed, the more I realize it should be cut, because it is a story about it covers a lot of beats that a lot of the other stories told. And so it was a story about a failing relationship and about memory. And it was just it was a squabbling couple. And in the moment of the impact, or in the moment of the alert, they have different ideas of what they want to do. And the woman in the story, it's told through her point of view. Her name is Elise, and she goes back in time, and she remembers this person that she fell in love with really, really early on. And this upcoming part is a particular motif that I used in another story, but it's revealed that she was in a graduate program, and she met another person in the graduate program, and he was this really kind of like a husky bear of a man who was a physicist and was very quiet. And they didn't really have an attraction at first, but then he one day said, "Oh, we're entangled particles," which comes up. It's used later. It's used in the final book, but in this first iteration, he says they're entangled particles, and they have this kind of really short but intense affair that seems really sort of bound by this idea of like kismet and fate. And when they part, she's devastated, and she moves on to this guy whom she's with, and with whom she's bickering at the very beginning of the story. And so it was a more, it was a pretty straightforward sort of what if, maybe like a sliding doors kind of scenario of a story that I was able to repurpose. I'll be honest, if I do ever have the opportunity to write some kind of a follow-up, what I've really been, I do want to write, this book had the intention of being hopeful. And I do hope that people find the message hopeful, even if a lot of the situations begin kind of darkly. But what I do want to write are, stories in which this alert somehow bring people together as well. Not just sort of, not lead to something in which then that needs to be reconciled, but something, that takes advantage of that kind of kismet aspect, somehow brings two people together.
Yeah. So like, speaking of follow-up, I mean, I think you can submit that story to like a magazine and they'll happily publish it. But like you said, you were working on another book, and I'm curious if it's, if it's the same case of like, oh, I started with a short story and it morphed into a novel.
Yes, it's the same case, although it's morphed right now into something that actually strays pretty far from the original short story. And so I'm a little bit, there's that sort of that entreaty to trust the process, but I feel as if almost my process has changed. That's for a whole other conversation, but I am working on something right now. Ironically, I've made a lot of progress on it recently because I had so much nervous energy in the lead up to the book publication. And I was just like checking Goodreads all the time, which is terrible idea. I know, but I couldn't help it. So I had this, instead of sitting on my hands, I gave them something to do. I started writing, I started really, really working on this new project. And this is a new project. It's about three Asian American boys who grow up in a small town together and have this real strong sense of brotherhood. They're not related, but they call each other brothers. And something traumatic happens, and two of them reconnect in older age in their like late 30s or early to mid 30s actually. And then they try to tell the story of what happens. And from this very basic framework, there are two things I really wanted to explore. The first is the real psychological and emotional effects of ghosting, beyond merely, like from an online dating perspective or something like that. a really sort of how it can affect a person where, someone who you think you understand fully and whom you love. Not only do you realize you didn't understand that person, but then you don't even have a reprieve. You don't even have a way to figure out what changed because of the ghosting that sort of cut off. And then the other main thing I want to explore is the idea of subscriptions. They are more and more prevalent in our lives, and I wanted to explore kind of the psychological effects of not owning anything, of not really of not committing to something, to having these constant sort of samples, and what that means with regards to the stories that we tell ourselves, if sometimes our pasts are just stories that we subscribe to, and how that leads to a malleability in the way we understand our pasts.
I think those are great themes to explore. I was just like thinking about, I mean, it was a random thought, but how like physical media and like physical forms of memories have just been like gradually disappearing from our lives. And I just think about the people who are like, remember when we were growing up with MySpace and they said that the internet was forever, but then things got deleted off the internet and now all of my high school memories are gone because I only had like digital versions of like my photos and videos. And it's like, yeah, we are living in that time where if Instagram decided to shut down, like years and years of photos and videos would just be gone. And it's like, oh, did you even live that life? Because you don't even have proof of it anymore. So I'm very excited to read your second book. So yeah.
What will the
Good luck to
aliens discover when they come to Earth and they say, oh, this civilization did not exist past the year 2000 because there are no physical evidence?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And then it was like, oh, and then a nuclear bomb just hit.
I would love to be able to subscribe from everything. I was looking at like all my subscriptions, like there's so many these days. Everything's a subscription.
Even your car these days have like subscriptions. Did you hear about like new cars? You have to subscribe to like, I don't know, like seat warmers. Like you have to pay monthly for those. And I was like, what? You bought the car. Like, why do they own parts of your, like, I just don't understand. Everything is a grift these days.
That being said, not a grift, hopefully, but we do appreciate all of our Patreon supporters for subscribing to Books and Boba. So we do appreciate your support. But yeah, Vincent, thank you so much for joining us on Books and Boba. Glad to hear you're making progress on the second book. We're looking forward to when that comes out. But yeah, thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thanks for having me.
And that was Vincent Yu. His debut novel, Seek Immediate Shelter, is available now at booksellers everywhere, including, as always, the Books and Boba online bookstore. So if you enjoyed our conversation and are interested in picking up Vincent's book, you can do so while supporting both Books and Boba and your local bookstores by going to booksandboba.com and checking out our bookshop link. I guess before we go, Reba, can you remind us what book we are reading for book club for May 2026?
Yeah, so we are reading Nono Boy, a 1957 novel by John Okada. It's one of the first books in the Asian American literary canon, and the publication history also is very dramatic. So we'll probably talk about that in our discussion episode as well, but I do encourage people to look it up. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this book that I have not read and it is on every single Asian American literature syllabus in colleges. So
yeah, it's a story that dives into the experiences of Japanese Americans as they return home after the end of World War II and their internment, and explores a lot of themes that somehow distressingly are still very, very relevant today. So yeah, I read this book for the first time back in college, so it's really, really cool to revisit the story, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion at the end of the month. And yeah, as always, if you finish the book and have some thoughts to share, please let us know either on Discord or on our Goodreads forums. As always, we love to include the feedback of our listeners in our book club discussions whenever possible. So really looking forward to what you think about this Asian American classic. And yeah, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you once again to Vincent Yu for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @Books and Boba, and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hungry for spicy food and even hotter conversations? Craving community and authentic storytelling? Then join the table. This is Minor Legends, a new comedy fiction podcast supported by Potluck. Pull up every week with me, Angela Wong Carbone, and follow the stories of me and my friends as we serve up tasty tales of what it means to be Asian American at our weekly dinner hang. If you enjoy deep dishing on absurd stereotypes like tiger moms who tutor your dating game rather than grades, the insanity of your parents' immigration story, to the legend of that one good Asian cousin you can never live up to, then pull up a seat and grab a plate. Featuring dinner guests like Ronnie Chang, Brian Park, Usama Siddiqui, Celia Au, Perry Young, Supriya Ganesh, and more. It's a tasty rotation that'll leave you belly laughing and steeped in relatable and spicy conversations. Can you take the heat? Listen now for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Kim Cooper, and I co-host the podcast Asians in Baseball alongside Naomi Ko and Scott Okamoto. Asians in Baseball is exactly what it sounds like, a podcast about the Asian and Asian Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Americans in Major League Baseball. Every week, we break down the highlights of what's going on with Asians in baseball and then take a deeper dive into the Asian and Asian Americans past and present who have shaped baseball as it is today. Whether you're Kim Eng's #1 fan or you've never even heard of Hideo Nomo, we've got something for everyone, especially for the Shohei Ohtani stans. Maybe too much for the Shohei Ohtani stans. Listen to Asians in Baseball wherever you get podcasts, part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.